I never thought a grey London Monday would start with a proposal. Well, a fraudulent one. It reached me across the low partition of my workstation like an illicit memo. "I need you to pretend to be my partner for the weekend," Miss Catherine Blackwood announced, her clipped accent as polished as the patent heels she wore. Every rumor about her, 46 icy brilliant senior partner who'd wrestled half the city into submission, now crystallized into the sharp line of her jaw. I blinked up from the licensing contracts I'd been proofreading since dawn. "Pardon. There's a wedding. My sister's. It's in 3 days at Foxglove Hall in the Lake District. My family expect me to arrive in love and in bloom. At my age, single apparently equals suspect." She folded her arms, azure silk blouse rustling, the only soft thing about her. "You suit the part." "We've barely exchanged anything but agendas and espresso orders," I muttered, pushing my tortoiseshell glasses higher on my nose. "Exactly why you'll survive under scrutiny," Catherine replied. "You know my rhythms, not my secrets. You won't improvise anything catastrophic." I rose, squaring the tweed jacket I'd bought in a charity shop. We were nearly eye to eye despite the decade between us, but she carried gravitational authority. "Hire an actress. Too flimsy." My mother would detect a script faster than a typo. A faint curve brushed her scarlet lips. "When she met you at the Christmas function, she told me, 'Why can't you bring home someone bright-eyed like that Ivy girl? You left an impression.'" He climbed my cheeks. "This is more than fake dating, Catherine. It's fake soulmating. What exactly do I get out of it? 3 nights at a Georgian manor, a bonus worth a quarter of your annual salary, and the pleasure of watching me appear human." Her steel-gray eyes flickered, nerves maybe. It was the first crack I'd seen in her impeccable armor. I should have refused. I should have protected the fragile, illogical attraction I'd nurtured from afar. Instead, some reckless part of me spoke. "If I do this, we sell it properly. Hand-holding, nicknames, inside jokes, the lot." The smile that broke across her face was terrifying and glorious. "Very well. But remember, Ivy Hartley, commitment cuts both ways." 3 days later, dawn light spilled through the tinted windows of the chauffeur-driven Jaguar slicing north on the M6. Catherine sat beside me, silent behind enormous sunglasses, briefing notes for a merger abandoned on her lap. I watched hedgerows blur past and tried to breathe. "We need backstory," I said, pushing hair from my eyes. "When did we meet?" 6 months ago," she answered without hesitation. "Who confessed first?" "You did." Completely unprofessional. I found it disarming. I grinned. "And you'll let me call you Cat when no one's listening?" "Once," she warned, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Rain began as we turned onto the gravel drive of Foxglove Hall, a honeystone estate overlooking a misty lake. Lanterns glowed under climbing roses. Guests in pastel linen fluttered across lawns. The sight knotted my stomach. "Too late to flee," I whispered. Catherine slipped her hand into mine. Warm, decisive. Much too late. The heavy oak doors swung wide before we reached them. Out swept Lady Helena Blackwood, a force of pearls and brisk affection. "Catherine!" she exclaimed, kissing the air near her daughter's cheek. Then those shrewd hazel eyes landed on me. "And this must be Ivy." My word, Catherine didn't exaggerate. Catherine's fingers tightened round mine. "Mother, be kind." "I always am." Lady Helena linked arms with me as if I'd belonged forever. "You two look right together." I knew she'd eventually find someone who could thaw that permafrost heart. Catherine's breath caught, just audible. I squeezed her hand, stepping closer. "She isn't frozen, Lady Helena. She simply saves her warmth for people she trusts." The older woman's smile softened, and for a fleeting second Catherine's gaze touched mine with something raw, almost wondering. Then the bustle of arrival swept us towards the marble foyer, and whatever passed between us hung shimmering and unresolved. Hours later, in the guest cottage assigned to us, twilight draped purple over the fells beyond the window. Catherine stood rigidly beside a wardrobe full of designer dresses, staring out as raindrops traced silver paths down the glass. I changed into a soft jumper behind a lacquered screen, heartbeat roaring. "They all believe us," she said, voice low. "Of course," I replied, stepping into the lamplight. "I'm frighteningly good at this. That's what scares me." She turned at last, eyes darker than storm clouds rolling over Windermere. "You're making me forget where the pretending stops." I moved closer until her perfume, jasmine and cold night air, wrapped around me. "Maybe we're not pretending as much as you think." Something flickered across her face, longing or terror dressed as poise. "Good night, Ivy," she murmured, slipping past me towards the bed. "Try not to dream of improbable things." But when I slipped under the duvet minutes later, the mattress dipped and her fingers brushed mine. Barely there, yet dizzyingly real. Outside, rain whispered against slate tiles, and inside my ribs a dangerous hope began to beat. It was only Friday. Morning washed Foxglove Hall in pale watercolor light, dripping from the eaves and turning the lawns to glass. I woke in the guest cottage, half of a bed that felt too wide, the other half already empty. The space where Catherine had lain was faintly warm, smelling of bergamot and midnight secrets. I found her outside on the flagstone terrace, phone to her ear, posture sharp as a lance against the tender sky. Mist rolled off the lake below, ghosting around her ankles. I watched the way tension lived in her shoulders, how even stillness seemed to cost her effort. When she ended the call, she didn't move, just breathed. One measured inhale, one brittle exhale. I padded across the stone in borrowed wool socks. "Bad news. Boardroom melodrama," she said without looking. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday." But her thumb kept tracing anxious circles over the phone screen, wanting to call someone back, wanting to be needed. "You're not at the office," I reminded her gently. "This weekend you're somebody's girlfriend. Soon you'll be dragged into seating chart diplomacy and cake tastings. None of them care about quarterly returns." She breathed out, fog curling from her lips. Terrifying notion. I slipped my arm through hers. "Come on, scary lady. We have a brunch to survive." Inside the manor, Lady Helena's idea of brunch resembled a royal banquet. Tiered platters of scones, silver pots of Earl Grey, champagne glinting in crystal. Catherine's relatives orbited the long table in bursts of tweed and pastel, more fascinated by us than by the monogrammed croissants. Her mother waved us to adjacent seats, eyes twinkling like she was stage directing a romance film. Catherine tensed beside me, so I knocked my knee lightly against hers. Conversation fluttered until an aunt asked the dreaded question. "So, Ivy dear, how did you two meet?" Catherine's never been forthcoming. The room hushed, expectant. Catherine's grip crushed her champagne flute. I smiled sweetly. "Broken coffee machine at the firm. Your niece was furious." "Misallocated resources," Catherine muttered to scattered laughter. "So I offered her mine," I continued. "But only if she sat and drank it with me. She looked like someone who needed caffeine and a reminder the world could be kind." "You just gave her your coffee?" Helena asked, hands clasped in delight. "Not exactly," Catherine interrupted, voice dry. "She said I looked like I needed caffeine and a hug, then threatened HR if I didn't accept." Gasps, then laughter. Cameras clicked. Beneath the table, Catherine's fingers found mine, steady, thankful. I felt the subtle melt of her posture, the glacier heart thawing degree by degree. An hour later we escaped into the walled herb garden behind the hall, rosemary and wet slate filling the air. She paced a narrow path between trimmed box hedges. "You make me sound soft," she accused, but her eyes were bright, not angry. "You are soft," I said, stepping into her personal orbit. "Only you keep it buried under Armani and sarcasm." Rain tapped the leaves, rhythmic and private. She stopped pacing. "Ivy, you're getting too good at this. At caring. At undoing me." Her voice was a rasp now, the facade wearing thin. This was supposed to be sanitary. Performance. But I can't tell which parts of you are acting. I stopped acting the moment you touched my hand in front of your mother. I admitted. Everything since has been dangerously real. Silence stretched. Then her gaze flicked to my mouth. Don't, she whispered. Don't what? Look at me like you want to kiss me. Then step back. She didn't move. Neither did I. Rain darkened her fringe. A droplet clung to her bottom lip. I could taste the tension, copper-bright, between us. Her hand rose as if against her will, knuckles brushing my cheekbone. This is a terrible idea, she breathed. So was inviting me here, I answered, heart roaring. Yet here we are. Her lips crashed into mine, urgent, decisive, shattering the rulebook she'd written for herself. She kissed like a woman starved of surrender, all precision gone, replaced by heat. My fingers curved around her lapel, anchoring. The herb garden spun, tasting of mint and rain. When she broke away, her pupils were blown wide, mascara smudged at the corners. She stared like she'd stumbled over sacred ground. We should go back, she croaked. They'll notice. Too late, sang a voice. Catherine's younger sister, Georgina, leaned against the archway, smirk firmly in place. Photographer wants shots by the fountain, lovebirds. Try to keep your clothes on. Face flaming, Catherine straightened. I smoothed her collar and whispered. Front row seats to the cat show. Let's give them something to talk about. The photoshoot was cinematic torture. Catherine's arm round my waist, my hand splayed over her heart, every flash freezing her quickened pulse beneath my palm. She looked polished, but each click of the shutter felt like a countdown. After the final shot, I felt tremors in her fingers. That evening, Foxglove Hall hosted a pre-wedding dinner beneath fairy-lit drapes. Violins floated through lavender-scented air. Catherine navigated toasts with Arctic grace, yet every time conversation lulled her gaze cut to me, hunger masquerading as indifference. I brushed her shoulder in passing, she shivered. I let my laugh fall against her ear. Her breath stuttered. Later, when lanterns glowed low and the relatives drifted towards nightcaps, we slipped away through paneled corridors, stealthy as teenagers. In the guest cottage, she closed the door with trembling hands. Neither of us spoke. Words were inadequate. I reached for her, pulled her mouth back to mine. The kiss ignited like tinder. Jackets hit the floor, silk rustled, the storm we'd held at bay now raging. She broke off, breathing ragged. If I don't stop, I'm going to ruin everything. Maybe some things need to be ruined to become true. Her eyes flashed with equal parts lust and fear. I'm your employer. Not here, I murmured, guiding her backward till she collided with the antique dresser. Here you're a woman who wants. A strangled sound escaped her throat as I kissed the hollow beneath her ear. Thunder rolled distant outside. Inside, only our hearts thundered. She gripped my waist, pulling me off balance, so we tumbled onto the bed in a tangle of damp clothes and harsher truths. She hovered over me, silhouette cut by lightning sneaking through curtains. Tell me this is okay. I want you, I whispered. I've wanted you since the day you told me my presentation font was unforgivably perky. A breathless laugh tumbled from her, the sound of something ancient breaking open. Then mouths met, slow this time, an exploration rather than a conquest. Her hands mapped me like uncharted coastline, reverent, almost shy. I answered with sighs, fingernails tracing the planes of her back, memorizing every place tension lived. Outside, rain intensified, drumming applause on the tiles. When need overcame caution, she guided us deeper, moving with deliberate care, learning the language of my body in real time. Shockwaves rippled through me, melding pleasure with a dizzying tenderness I hadn't expected. In those minutes I felt her shed decades of armor. Each gasp was an admission, each whispered ivy an apology for every wall she'd ever built. Afterward we lay tangled, sheets twisted at our feet, both too stunned to speak. Her hand rested over my heartbeat as if confirming it would keep going. I stroked damp strands of hair from her forehead. Still pretending? I asked quietly. Her eyes, silver in the dim lamplight, softened to something perilously close to hope. No, she breathed. Pretending ended the moment you said you wanted me. Silence settled, but it was a living silence, thrumming with possibilities. She watched me like the answer to a question she hadn't dared ask. Eventually she whispered, "This complicates everything." "Complicated things taste better," I replied, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I should draft rules," she murmured, but even as she said it her eyelids fluttered, exhaustion winning. I pulled the duvet over us. She surprised me by shifting closer, draping an arm over my waist, forehead nuzzling the crease of my neck. The Ice Queen seeking warmth. Rain eased to a hush. Somewhere in the hall a clock chimed midnight. I lay awake a while, tracing idle circles on her spine, feeling her breathe against me. The weekend had slipped its disguise. Tomorrow's sunlight would demand explanations. But tonight, in this hush between storms, Catherine Blackwood slept in my arms, and every careful boundary she'd drawn lay washed away like chalk in rain. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her settle, and for the first time since agreeing to this impossible favor, I welcomed the chaos to come. Morning stretched pale and gold across the Lake District, brushing the fells outside our cottage with timid light. I woke to the soft hush of drawers opening and closing. Catherine was already half-dressed, fastening the top button of an eggshell blue shirt while pretending the previous night's earthquake had never broken the surface. Her hair, still damp from the shower, fell in loose waves instead of its usual immaculate twist, and for a dangerous moment I could see the woman beneath the armor. Barefoot, uncertain, gorgeously undone. She caught my gaze in the mirror and ducked her head, resuming the familiar choreography of self-control. "Family luncheon on the West Lawn at 12, she murmured, voice brushed with gravel. "Mother insists on lakeside photographs beforehand, where something the wind can't scandalize. You act like last night was a weather event we should simply board up and forget," I said, stretching beneath the duvet. "Precisely." Her tone was crisp, but the hand smoothing her collar trembled. "We agreed to rules. You drafted them in your sleep." I swung my legs over the side of the bed. "Because I seem to recall you calling me indecently necessary around 3 a.m. Color rode high on her cheekbones. I was exhausted. I padded across the plush rug, planted myself in her space. "Cat, look at me." She did. Gray eyes rimmed in sleepless shadow, vulnerability flickering like a candle in a draft. I touched the row of tiny buttons on her shirt, feeling her pulse hammer beneath the silk. "If pretending ended, we need a new plan." "I don't do plans where variables have feelings," she whispered. "That's unfortunate because your variables are madly in love with you." Her breath shuddered, but footsteps in the corridor spared her a reply. A knock followed. Georgina's cheerful call that breakfast pastries were on offer. Catherine slipped from my reach, mask sliding neatly into place, and opened the door with a breezy good morning that fooled everyone but me. By noon, Foxglove Hall buzzed like a stirred beehive. Caterers carried crystal flutes onto the west lawn, and the lake, a pewter disk under fitful sun, reflected tents, bunting, and relatives brandishing phones. I'd chosen a tea-rose midi dress that swirled forgivingly around my knees. Catherine, of course, looked like bespoke sin in charcoal trousers and a soft dove-gray jacket. As we approached the crowd, her fingers brushed mine once, plea or warning I couldn't tell, then settled at her side. Lady Helena greeted us first, cheeks flushed with hostess zeal. Behind her, Sir Russell Blackwood, silver-haired, skeptical, raised a glass. "Ah, Catherine's miracle worker," he said, nodding toward me. "Haven't seen my daughter smile in years." "She practices in private," I replied, earning a surprised chuckle from him and a covert elbow from Catherine. We merged into the semicircle of family posed for lakeside photographs. The air smelled of wet grass and champagne. Violinists on a temporary dais played something intent on sounding effortless. I wove an arm through Catherine's and felt stiffness radiate from her like frost. Cameras flashed and skewed. Somewhere behind the hedgerow, thunder rumbled, a distant promise of more rain. Then a new voice sliced the pleasantries. Catherine Blackwood, as forbidding as ever. A tall woman approached, crimson coat billowing. She was early 40s, with a smile honed for boardrooms and battlefields. Harriet Vale, she introduced to the unsuspecting cluster. Old colleague, temporary consultant on the event. Her gaze slipped to me, assessing. And you must be the assistant turned sweetheart. How efficient. The temperature of the gathering dipped. Catherine's grip on my waist tightened like a vice. Harriet oversees logistics, not gossip, she said, enamel hard. Oh, logistics are all about flow, Harriet replied, eyes gleaming. Information flows fastest. She drifted off, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and implied menace. Catherine's shoulders locked. I leaned closer. Ex-partner in business or in life? Neither. She wanted both. I declined both. Her voice flattened. She never quite forgave me. Do you think she'll stir trouble? She just did. Before I could answer, Lady Helena summoned us to the long tables dressed in ivory linen. Catherine and I sat side by side, our knees nudging beneath damask. Conversation hummed. Honeymoon plans, floral arches, the coming storm clouds. I poured tea for Catherine. She accepted with a tight nod but didn't drink. Her attention darted across the lawn, tracking Harriet's red coat weaving through cousins like a warning flare. Halfway through lemon tart, a cousin named Felix leaned forward. Heard a rumor this engagement began as an arrangement, he said, voice oily. Power dynamics, that sort of thing. Any truth? Cutlery paused all along the table. Catherine's face went marble still. My heart kicked. Before she could marshal a legal rebuttal, I laid my hand over hers, turned to Felix with what my colleagues called the fire-breathing kitten smile. The truth is, Catherine prefers facts to rumors. Fact. We're absurdly happy. Fact. Nothing about that is anyone else's ledger to audit. Felix swallowed, muttered an apology, and found profound interest in his cut-glass water goblet. Around us conversation restarted, but the damage was done. Catherine's guard ratcheted higher. We fled the table as soon as decorum allowed. She led me along a gravel path toward an old stone boathouse crouched at the lake's edge, ivy clinging like regret. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and oars. Light slashed through gaps in the boarding. Catherine paced, heels clicking on worn planks. She's poisoning them, she snapped. Harriet's always 5 steps ahead, planting the story before we can control it. We don't need to control it, I argued. We just need to live the truth. Her laughter was a brittle fracture. Truth doesn't matter. Ticks do. I built my career on that. Then let them watch the optics of you trusting me. She stopped, breathing hard. In the dimness, her eyes looked storm-bruised. Ivy, I don't know how. Every time I come close, I hear the axe drop. She mimed a blade. Employees leave. Lovers decide I'm workaholic or heartless. Friends wither of neglect. I can't let you be the next casualty. I stepped into her path, palms against the smooth lapels of her jacket. You don't let me. I choose. I'm not glass, Catherine. I won't splinter if your world tilts. That's easy to say before headlines question your integrity. Then let them question, I said, voice rising with the wind off the lake. I'll answer by staying. Every morning, every fight, every impossible schedule. Silence. Rain began again outside, pattering on the slate roof. She reached up, brushed fingers down my cheek as though uncertain I'd stay solid. I am terrified of you, she whispered. Because I'm the variable with feelings. Because those feelings make me want futures, and futures carry losses. She inhaled shakily. I watched my father crush my mother with broken promises. I swore never to need anyone enough to be crushed. I took her hand, pressed it flat over my heartbeat. It's dangerous, yes, but so is living numb. Footsteps thudded on the dock outside, voices overlapping. Georgina burst through the boathouse door, cheeks flushed from the wind. You two, there you are. We've discovered why Harriet's skulking. Someone tipped off a tabloid. They're sending a photographer to the reception tonight. Catherine's jaw flexed. Of course. She wants a scandal shot. Then let's give her a different headline, I said. Georgina's brows arched. Catherine turned wary. I laid out the idea in seconds. We'd leave the shadows, step into the center of the reception arm in arm, and show affection that couldn't be twisted. Simple, ordinary, undeniable. No furtive looks, no cracks for rumor to seep through. I half expected Catherine to scold the recklessness. Instead, something fierce sparked behind her eyes. Visibility as armor, she murmured. Radical. Love as optics, I corrected and slipped my fingers between hers. The evening reception unfurled beneath billowing marquees lit with hundreds of fairy lights. Rain had eased to a silver mist, turning every lantern halo into art. As guests collected cocktails, Catherine and I walked directly onto the parquet dance floor. She paused under the brightest chandelier, looked at me as though the universe hinged on my steadiness, and pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles. Conversations around us dipped, astonished. Harriet's crimson coat hovered at the fringe, camera phone poised. Catherine drew me into a slow waltz right there without music. Gasps fluttered, then applause. Then the quartet caught the cue and launched into something sweeping. We turned beneath the lights, her hand warm at my waist, mine at her shoulder, two silhouettes rejecting shame. I felt the tremor still in her spine, but she held my gaze, let the room fade. Whatever photos Harriet captured told a story of a woman willingly vulnerable in another's arms, and there was no scandal in that, only daring. After the dance, Lady Helena pulled us into a fierce double embrace. "About time," she whispered, eyes glossy. Even Sir Russell clapped Catherine's back, murmuring approval. Across the lawn, Harriet pocketed her phone, expression unreadable, then disappeared into the mist. Near midnight, the manor had gone quiet except for echoes of distant laughter. In our cottage, we changed into borrowed robes and collapsed beside each other on the wide window seat, watching wind-ruffled reflections on the lake. Catherine's head found my shoulder, exhaustion melting her posture. "Did we win?" she asked. "We survived," I said. "Tomorrow's another boss level." She chuckled, low and real, then turned, knees drawn up. "Thank you for forcing me onto the dance floor, for refusing to let fear write our narrative. Partners, remember?" Her eyes glimmered. "I don't know what comes when we leave this place. Commutes and spreadsheets," I guessed, brushing hair from her forehead. "But also toothbrush negotiations, burnt toast arguments, stray socks in your clinically perfect wardrobe." She rolled her eyes. "Chaos incarnate. My speciality." I sobered, tracing the line of her jaw. "I'm in, Catherine. Not for the performance. For mornings and meltdowns and decades." Silence unfurled like a sail catching wind. She lifted my hand, kissed my palm, 1, 2, 3 soft presses. "I want that decade," she said, voice hoarse. "And the one after, though I'll probably still schedule our anniversaries in Outlook. I'll send you spontaneous calendar invites marked kiss break." Finally, she smiled, the elusive smile that had stunned shareholders and frightened rivals. "Ivy Hartley, if you keep doing that, I may find myself proposing in a panic. Save the panic for Monday meetings. Proposals require calm." "Calm is overrated," she whispered, and drew me into a kiss that tasted of rain and reckoning and a world finally tilting the right way. Outside, thunder moved farther off, rumbling towards Scotland. Inside, the ice had cracked. The lake of her heart was beginning at last to thaw. Monday dawned iron gray over the Thames, the kind of sky that made glass towers look like unfinished sketches. We stepped out of the black cab in front of Blackwood and Partners just after 6, hands clasped inside Catherine's coat pocket, a pact hidden from the morning rush. The weekend felt like a fever dream. Rain-slick waltzes, whispered confessions, but the city breathed cold reality. Across the street, paparazzi crouched behind barriers, lenses already trained on the revolving doors. Harriet's leak had outgrown Foxglove Hall. Headlines now screamed senior partners' scandalous office romance, and power imbalance or true love. A red-eyed intern held the Financial Times toward U.S. Catherine ignored it, spine straight as the gherkin, but her grip on my fingers trembled. Security hustled us through service elevators to the executive floor. Anonymous bouquets, white lilies, red roses, pitying chrysanthemums, littered the corridor like landmines. Catherine's private assistant, Jonah, hovered at her door with a stack of messages. Emergency board session at 9. They want clarification, damage report, maybe your head. His gaze flicked to me. And Ms. Hartley's. Thank you, Jonah, Catherine said, voice glacier cool. Clear my calendar after 10. And send decent coffee to legal. They'll need it. Inside her glass-walled office, the skyline spread like a challenge. Catherine crossed to the window, arms folded, muscles taut beneath her blouse. I set our coats over a chair and paced, heart-punching ribs. If the board votes to muzzle you, we can walk, I blurted. Start our own consultancy. Clients follow talent. She turned, half smiling despite the storm. You'd burn your career for me. I'd build a new one with you. Her eyes softened, but a knock cut the moment. Jonah returned, cheeks flushed. Press are live streaming downstairs. They claim you exploited a junior employee for personal gain. The board fears litigation. Litigation, Catherine muttered. For falling in love. She thanked him and dismissed him with a nod that looked like mercy. Then she faced me, mask slipping. I can fight them, Ivy, but battles cost collateral. You deserve safe ground. Safe is overrated, I said, backing her against the desk. Besides, they'll underestimate us. A terrible strategic error. 9 o'clock came like a gunshot. The board assembled in the mahogany conference chamber. 12 directors in tailored armor, faces carved from caution. I sat at Catherine's right, notebook steady though my pulse galloped. Cameras were banned, but rumor sat in every empty seat. Sir Malcolm Reeves, silver-browed chair, cleared his throat. Ms. Blackwood, accusations of impropriety threaten client confidence. Explain. Catherine rose. Sunlight caught the faint shake in her hands. She anchored them on the polished table. The truth is unvarnished, she began, voice carrying. Ms. Hartley was my assistant. She is now my partner. Professionally equal and personally indispensable. Our relationship evolved without coercion, without quid pro quo. Company policy allows consensual disclosure, which I filed this morning. She slid a document across the table. The paper whispered, lethal and calm. But if my integrity is now a liability, I will resign. Provided every client consultation I led, every profit surge I delivered, is likewise stricken from our records. The room rustled. Removing Catherine meant unpicking half the empire. I pressed my knee to hers beneath the table. Steadfast backup. Malcolm adjusted his spectacles. Dramatic ultimatums rarely aid governance. Neither does cowardice, Catherine replied. I will not apologize for loving someone who reminds me why this work matters. A murmur spread. The HR director's eyes slid to the counsel at her side. Policies were clear, reputations less so. Finally, Malcolm sighed. The board accepts your disclosure. We require a brief leave of absence while legal completes a review. Afterwards, your partnership stands, if no misconduct is found. Relief crashed through me, but Catherine only inclined her head, calm as a general accepting ceasefire. Very well. Files will transition smoothly. The meeting adjourned in uneasy silence. In the corridor, Catherine exhaled as though she'd been holding her breath since childhood. Leave of absence, she repeated, stunned. They might have cut my wings. Now you get to test them, I said. Let's fly elsewhere for a bit. 2 weeks later, we traded Canary Wharf's glass canyons for the ragged cliffs of Cornwall, renting a weather-beaten cottage in Port Isaac. Wind combed Catherine's hair into salt-rimmed curls. I watched her barefoot on slate steps, sleeves rolled, laughing because the power out here came from tides, not shareholders. We spent mornings on laptops, she consulting discreetly, me drafting pitches for a freelance copy gig. Our desks a scarred farmhouse table facing the sea. Afternoons we walked headlands, Catherine naming wildflowers she'd learned as a girl before ambition drowned leisure. Evenings we cooked badly, burned garlic bread, danced in the kitchen to Bowie while gulls cried outside like ancient hecklers. Harriet's poison headlines dried up, replaced by election noise and football drama. The scandal's half-life ended faster than predicted. Love, it turned out, generated fewer clicks than chaos. One violet dusk we hiked to the old Coast Guard lookout, a stone shell perched above crashing surf. Wind roared through gaps like a cathedral organ. Catherine stood at the edge, trench coat whipping, eyes on the horizon where sun bled into pewter. I wrapped my arms around her from behind. Thinking of hostile takeovers. Tease. Thinking of permanence, she said. These rocks have weathered every storm imaginable, yet here they remain. Steadfast, eroded perhaps, but still rising. She turned, cheeks pink from cold, and reached inside her coat. My heart collided with my ribs as she withdrew a slim velvet box. "Ivy Hartley," she began, voice rougher than North Atlantic waves. "You walked into my life with caffeine and audacity, demolished my defenses, rewrote my future. I am still terrified. But fear is no longer my compass. You are. So I'm asking, without board approval, without PR spin, will you marry me?" Wind stole my breath. Tears blurred cliffs and sky. "Yes," I managed, half laugh, half sob. 1,000 times. She slid the ring onto my finger. A rose gold band set with a small storm-gray diamond, as if the sky itself had been cut and polished. We kissed, salt and sunshine on our tongues, waves hammering applause far below. Back in London, autumn painted the plane trees gold. Catherine's leave ended. The board reinstated her without fuss, profits overriding gossip. But she returned on her own terms, part-time, insisting on remote flexibility, citing life priorities the spreadsheets failed to predict. She invited me to strategy breakfasts and introduced me as co-founder of our future. I rented out my tiny flat and moved into her Canary Wharf apartment, which soon sprouted plants and second-hand books and my scandalous socks. Harriet sent a terse bouquet of olive branches, literal olive branches, and an unsigned note, "Truce." We pressed them in a heavy ledger and laughed every time we opened it. On a fog-soft Saturday in December, we met Lady Helena at St. Pancras, catching the Eurostar to Paris for dress shopping that turned into wine testing that turned into dancing under fairy lights by the Seine. Catherine spilled secrets in French. I replied in laughter fluent enough for both of us. She wore a ring now, and whenever her fingers traced the band she smiled like she'd surprised herself all over again. Nights, we lay in the glow of city lights filtered through blinds, plotting a wedding small enough to hold only the people who never doubted us, yet large enough for the gratitude we owed. Sometimes Catherine still woke at 3, breath quick, ghosts of abandonment rattling chains. I'd pull her onto my chest, stroke her hair until heartbeats synchronized and whisper, "Here. I'm here." Other times it was me, panicking at the magnitude of forever, and she'd murmur, "Steady, love. The rocks stand." The following spring, overlooking the serpentine of the Thames from a rooftop garden near Tower Bridge, we spoke vows crafted in the language of hard-won faith. Rain threatened, of course, our perpetual blessing, but sunlight broke through at the moment Catherine said, "I choose you in boardrooms and boathouses, in front-page glare and Cornish dusk, in every season my fear invents." My reply promised burnt toast and deadline pep talks, courage on storm days, laughter enough to echo off skyscrapers. When she kissed me, London erupted in church bells and distant traffic horns, ordinary life saluting extraordinary risk. And so the story that began as a favor ended not with an epilogue but with a prologue. Two hearts stumbling into trust, learning that power is nothing without tenderness, that ice melts quicker when someone believes in spring. We walked away hand in hand, not boss and assistant, not scandal and defense, but partners, armorless, unstoppable, into a city suddenly bright with possibility.